Amazing moment. Billionaire's son, exposed as chaos unfolds. Touching connection with waitress Tar. Jake's heart raced as she wiped the sticky counter of the Brooklyn diner, the clamor of the late-night rush swirling around her like a tornado. Each slap of a plate, every ringing of the bell, echoed her burdens back to her. A $10 an hour wage wasn't enough to raise her siblings, not after Dad's sudden death. Grief was a blanket, heavy and suffocating. She inhaled, pushing the tension down, forcing herself to focus on the endless offerings of coffee and omelets. The last thing she wanted was to screw up, especially not now. She noticed a table of well-dressed patrons, royalty amidst this kingdom of grease and neon light. Among them, Tyler sat, his confident demeanor betraying a collision of privilege and unrest. She felt a pang of envy, mixed with resentment, as she remembered his effortlessly suave smile than her own torn uniform. But she had no time for jealousy. Her siblings needed her. They counted on her, while grief gnawed at the edges of her spirit, threatening to unravel her resolve. Filled with determination, Jake processed orders with practiced ease. There had been a time when art was her refuge, a secret world of paint and colors. Today, it felt like a distant memory, buried beneath the responsibilities weighing her down. The thought of pursuing her passion flickered like the dim light of a candle in a storm. But dreams could wait, she thought, as customers beckoned. Then, disaster struck. A cup slipped from her hand, coffee cascading over her uniform. Tyler's eyes widened as he sprang forward, the klutzy gesture unexpectedly unearthing something deeper within her. The embarrassment washed over her skin like the scalding liquid. Instead of anger, she saw something in his face. Perhaps it was understanding, or maybe curiosity. They locked eyes, and within that moment, Jake felt seen. Not just a waitress, but as a person wrestling with life's chaos. "Let me help," he offered, his voice sincere as he handed her towels, the rich aroma of coffee mingling with the scent of desperation. In that brief exchange, they became two souls navigating separate storms. They dove into conversation, Jake sharing stories of her struggles with raising her siblings, while Tyler revealed the stifling weight of expectations he bore, suffocated by his family's pursuit of wealth and prestige. It was exhilarating and terrifying to connect, to reveal fragments of themselves that had remained hidden for too long. Before they continued, "I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." But as the laughter faded, a shadow loomed over them. Jake learned of Tyler's identity, the billionaire heir. She felt a gut-wrenching squeeze of betrayal, her heart simultaneously drawn and repelled. Her instincts screamed to retreat, to shield her family from the risks that came with mingling with the elite, the judgments, the sneers from those who could never comprehend her fight. Tyler, too, felt the strain. The weight of his surname pressed down like a vice, the echoes of his family's legacy drowning out genuine connection. In that moment, heart racing, they were ensnared in a web of uncertainties, desire shadowed by fear. As they stood caught in the chaos of their worlds, an acute realization hit hard. If they forged ahead, they might open doors to futures neither imagined. But at what cost? With every fleeting connection, the divide between their lives seemed to stretch, sulking on the cusp of transformation. The precipice of decision loomed, the stakes rising while time threatened to snatch away an opportunity for something authentic. Would they dare push against the tides, risking everything to find solace in a shared dream? Jake's mind buzzed with uncertainty as she resumed her table duties, her hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee. The brief exchange with Tyler had been a jarring juxtaposition to the weight of her reality. Her thoughts spiraled, questioning what this fleeting encounter meant. Was it possible for someone like her, bound by obligations, to share even a moment's worth of authenticity with someone so different? Each order placed was a stark reminder of the responsibilities pressing against her chest. Her ambition felt like a distant echo, overshadowed by the task of raising her siblings and maintaining the household. A persistent voice in her mind warned her to stay away from Tyler, to ignore the magnetic pull toward his world. She found herself unconsciously glancing at him every few moments, watching as he conversed easily, laughter punctuating the air as if he were in an entirely different reality. The more she watched, the louder her internal conflict grew. Art had been her only escape, but her brushes remained untouched, other than a hasty sketch hidden in her notebook. What if this connection with Tyler offered her a pathway back to her passion? Yet the stakes felt impossibly high. Seeking this revelation could fracture the delicate balance that kept her family afloat. Towards the end of her shift, a well-dressed woman sitting at the table adjacent to Tyler beckoned for her attention. As Jake approached, the woman scrutinized her attire, her gaze laced with pity. "Do you ever think about doing something outside of here?" the woman questioned, an accusatory tone insinuating that Jake's presence at the diner was somehow beneath her. It stung, the subtle implication that Jake had resigned herself to mediocrity. But her defenses surged, catalyzed by the woman's words. "This place is a stepping stone for me. I'm just working on different plans," Jake replied, the determination in her voice surprising even herself. Inside, a flicker of rebellion ignited. This woman and her world mirrored the divide Jake felt, but she refused to allow herself to be trapped by perceptions that constrained her. That night, as she wiped down counters and stacked chairs, Jake ambitiously plotted a way to exempt art from the shadows. Perhaps applying to an art program, or finding ways to showcase her work, could rekindle her passion without shattering her commitments. But could she bridge the gap between aspiring artist and underappreciated waitress? Suddenly, Tyler appeared beside her, his presence illuminating the dim diner. "I didn't mean to intrude, but I felt there was more about you in that brief moment we shared," he said, the sincerity in his voice melting away a fraction of her guardedness. "I know things are complicated, but would you ever want to explore something different? For yourself?" Jake's heart pounded, the echo of his suggestion resonating far beyond mere words. What had begun as a moment of shared understanding now brimmed with a daunting opportunity. She sensed the possibility, swirling dangerously close to her vision. Yet a question loomed ominously. Could she tie her newfound connection with Tyler to a personal resurgence without severing the ties binding her to her family? As they stood at the threshold of what could be an exhilarating yet precarious chapter in her life, she couldn't ignore the growing fear of either losing herself or being pulled into a world that could consume her. The tension hung palpably in the air, urging her to decide. Would she dare to leap into the unknown? The moment felt critical, her pulse quickening with every breath. "Just think about it, Jake," Tyler continued, his eyes intense yet inviting, weaving a thread into her mind of what could be. But her thoughts swirled dangerously. The weight of commitment and connection bore down like never before. Perhaps the true question wasn't simply how far she could push herself into new horizons, but whether she was prepared to confront the consequences of choosing to change everything. As she battled internally, the diner faded into the background. Her gaze locked onto Tyler, determination clashing with her deepest fears. And with that silence between them, everything hung in the balance. Would she summon the courage to craft a path that bled into her dreams, or retreat back into safety? The horizon felt tantalizingly close, yet terrifyingly far, teetering now on the edge of something new. The buzz of the diner faded into a blur, the clinking dishes and muffled conversations morphing into a backdrop of uncertainty. Jake's heart raced as she grappled with Tyler's invitation. His words echoed in her mind, but a chasm of hesitation stretched between aspiration and reality. Could she truly entertain the fantasy of pursuing art again? Everything she knew, her responsibilities, her identity, loomed like an immovable weight, but something in her longed to break free. As she discreetly watched Tyler interact with a group of friends, a peculiar thought rooted itself in Jake's mind. He represented not just a different life, but also the side of herself she had sacrificed. The vibrant colors of her sketches teased her with memories of freedom and self-expression. For so long, she'd allowed life to define her. But now, in the presence of someone who seemed undeniably alive, a spark ignited. Faint, yet potent. That night, as she returned home to her siblings' laughter, the obligations once again pressed down like a heavy shroud. Dinner around the table felt like an anchor, grounding her to responsibilities she could not abandon. In the midst of their chatter, Jake felt an unsettling disconnect, her mind swirling with visions of brushstrokes and colors competing against the mundane routine. "Jake, what's wrong? You look kind of out of it," her younger brother, who always had a keen sense for her emotions, asked, concern furrowing his brow. "Just thinking about my plans. Nothing to worry about," she replied, forcing a smile. Yet her heart screamed for adventure, for a chance to reclaim the artist buried beneath layers of duty. A plan began to coalesce in her mind. What if she started small by setting aside just 15 minutes a day? Little canvases hidden in her room could spark the flame within her once more, inching closer to a life that bore her signature. Days turned into weeks, and with each shift at the diner, Jake honed her resolve. The moments with Tyler had stoked a fire that refused to extinguish, compelling her to sketch whenever she could. In the quiet corners of her life, she drew. At first, it was just doodles, then fleeting ideas that morphed into larger concepts. One evening, paper and pencil in hand, Jake sketched Tyler unaware, capturing the light that danced across his features. As her pencil moved instinctively, deeper thoughts surfaced. The more she captured, the more she realized that these artistic expressions were not merely remnants of a dream. They were statements of identity, vivid affirmations of her capability. But as her artistic pursuits grew, so did the tension within her. Would this new endeavor erode the fabric of her carefully maintained life? The voice of practicality warned her. The risk of failing to meet her familial commitments loomed large. The question became not just whether she could become an artist again, but whether she should. And then came a pivotal moment when Tyler approached her at the diner one afternoon, excitement lighting his eyes. "I've been thinking, Jake. There's an art showcase coming up. You should submit something. I can help you get it ready." Her heartbeat quickened, the prospect both thrilling and terrifying. The path forward shimmered invitingly, yet the reality of her obligations knotted her stomach into an anxious coil. Jake found herself at a crossroads, the horizon shifting even further. The pull toward this opportunity forced her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Could she balance the art that fueled her soul with the family that depended on her? Could she reject the fear of failure and embrace the potential of flourishing creatively, alongside her duties? As Tyler's words hung in the air, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of revelation. Jake's resolve hardened. She had to decide. Would she seize this moment, or allow doubt and responsibility to bind her still? The time had come to face what it truly meant to choose for herself. Her mind raced with possibilities, and just as she prepared to formulate a response, the door of the diner swung open, and a figure from her past stepped inside. A confrontation she never expected looming just ahead. Would she falter, or would she rise to meet the chaos closing in? As the door swung open, the familiar figure sent a wave of recognition crashing over Jake, pulling her ruthlessly away from candid possibilities. It was Mark, her high school art teacher, the one who had first identified her talent and fanned the flames of her passion. Yet, their past was tangled. After she'd chosen practicality over aspiration, he had drifted away, leaving her with nothing but remnants of unfulfilled potential. His presence felt like an echo of the dreams she had laid aside. He scanned the diner, casual yet poised, before locking eyes with her, She instinctively straightened, heart pounding. Not from excitement, but from the weight of judgment she expected to see reflected in his gaze. Would he see the artist of yesteryears lost beneath layers of duty? Would he understand that the dreams he once inspired now faced extinction? "Jake," he called, a buoyant smile breaking across his face. "It's been too long. How have you been?" She forced a smile, her discomfort hidden beneath a facade of politeness. "Good. Busy." What else could she say? The truth felt like a disloyalty to the years spent neglecting her art. "Still sketching?" His eyes glimmered with that familiar enthusiasm. "Occasionally," she replied, keeping her answer vague to avoid the question marked by intensity. "Just occasionally? You know that's not what I wanted for you." There was an edge of disappointment beneath his cheerful tone. She caught it, crackling like static in the air. Jake stiffened, the walls of self-denial closing in. "I have responsibilities now, Mark. Things change." "So you've chosen the cage instead of the sky?" His inquiry stung, barbed and unrestrained. "You always had wings, Jake. Why let them wither?" His bluntness brought forth a swell of emotions she had long suppressed. Unwanted guilt morphed into a fiery determination. "I'm not withering. I'm just prioritizing." But as she let her words fall, self-doubt gnawed at her resolve. Was she truly choosing her responsibilities, or had she opted for a safe path paved with regret? "And what about that showcase?" he probed, holding her gaze. "Have you considered submitting?" I might," Jake stuttered, hesitation threading through her confidence. "You might, or you want to?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice, dripping with that now familiar mentorly passion. "You still have the time to be who you are. Don't let fear and guilt box you in." His words nestled deep within her, striking chords she had suppressed beneath familiar routines. No longer were they voices of unremarkable doubt, but rather echoes of a potential yet to materialize. Unlike the gentle nudging of Tyler, Mark's confrontation mirrored the internal battle she'd been grappling with, the clash between duty and self-fulfillment. What would it mean to redefine herself, to reclaim the lost artist beneath layers of obligation? Jake breathed deeply, the tumult within her churning wildly. She couldn't remain stagnant any longer. But each flicker of potential was countered by the enormity of responsibility that awaited her beyond the diner. Before she could react, Tyler emerged from the kitchen, apron around his waist, eyes bright. He spotted Mark and waved, oblivious to the tempest swirling in Jake's mind. The sight of Tyler reignited her ambition once more, intertwining it dangerously with the weight of familial expectation. "Should we talk about this more?" Mark suggested, hopeful and confrontational all at once. How could she unravel her burgeoning artistic aspirations while navigating the commitments bound to her family? The stakes felt monumental. She stood at a precipice. A choice lay before her, one that would determine the trajectory of her life. With her heart racing and mind clouded in potential, she prepared to respond. It was more than a decision about art. It was a defining moment in her identity. Could she dismantle the walls around her true self? "Actually, I need to think," she finally said, the resolve settling in her chest even as uncertainty loomed larger than before. But just as she turned away, the buzz of the diner filled her ears once more, mingled with the scent of possibilities and consequences. The crossroads had shifted, and a deeper conflict had sparked within her. Would she embrace the chaos of her re-emerging identity, or retreat to the comfort of her current reality? The answer was still hidden, barely out of reach as the din of patrons swelled, forging a juxtaposition of familiarity against the unease echoing in her heart. The moment stretched, and with it came the realization that her journey was just beginning, not just as an artist but as a person capable of taking ownership of her life. As Jake took a shaky breath, the weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. The rising tide of uncertainty flared within her, and she felt it distinctly. Her old self wrestling to break free, even as family and past choices threatened to hold her down. In the eye of this gathering storm of conflict, a new face entered the diner, casting a shadow over Jake's thoughts. A choice wrapped in secrets waiting to unfold. Would it propel her forward, or lead her to further entanglements she hadn't anticipated? Jake forced herself to move, the din of the diner sending her mind racing with thoughts too heavy to bear. The familiar clink of cutlery and low murmur of patrons created a chaotic symphony that reflected the tumult inside her. She should feel grateful. A stable job, a life mapped out in familiar patterns. But the vivid memory of her sketches, of the unrestrained joy that art had once brought her, seeped through the cracks of her carefully constructed facade. Tyler stood beside Mark, animatedly chatting about a new flavor of pie they were experimenting with in the kitchen. Their laughter felt like a distant echo in her ears, a reminder of all that she silently sacrificed while masquerading as the dutiful employee and daughter. She couldn't shake off Mark's probing words. That question of choice versus obligation hung over her like a dark cloud casting shadows upon her heart. Without consciously deciding, she found herself retreating to the back of the diner, her mind racing, each footstep heavy with uncertainty. Her small office, cluttered yet personal, was a sanctuary where decisions would fester unseen. She perched on her desk, a silent witness to her struggle, staring at a blank page half covered in charcoal smudges and half-finished ideas. They mocked her, the remnants of dreams that felt more tangible than her reality. What if she took a leap? The thought lingered, suspended like a weightless feather, before being swallowed by a deluge of doubt. The showcase Mark had mentioned, her instincts screamed at her to consider it seriously. Was she ready to face that stage, to expose herself to both admiration and critique? Or would she choose the safety of routine, where the risk of failure was blissfully absent? "Jake?" Tyler's voice cut through her reverie, the warmth in his tone tethering her to the present. He stepped into the room, a bright smile illuminating his face. "Everything okay?" The sight of him sent a rush of conflicting emotions through her. She couldn't deny the comfort he provided, but it tethered her further to the path of mediocrity. "Yeah, just thinking," she replied, the reply feeling deceptively simple against the tempest of her thoughts. "About that showcase?" His hopeful expression seemed to peel back layers of her hesitation, exposing the raw nerve beneath. "You should totally do it. I mean, it's a chance to show what you can do. Imagine all those people appreciating your talent." Jake wanted to agree, wanted to feel his enthusiasm as her own. But then a quiet voice in her head warned, what happens if she fails? Would she drag down not just her own aspiration, but the support of the people who cared? "It's complicated. I have responsibilities here, Tyler." He stepped closer, his brow furrowing. "But what about your dreams? You can't just ignore that part of yourself." In that moment, she felt the weight of his plea pushing against her desire for security. His earnestness ignited something inside her, forcing a crack in her tight-held defenses. "I don't know if I even remember how to be that person," she admitted, shame curling around her heart as she spoke. "Of course you do. You just have to let her out." There was a softness in his gaze that made her want to trust him, to believe in a future she had long strayed from. What if I try, and it doesn't work out? The question hung heavy between them, a wall of fear she was too familiar with. Tyler took a breath, his voice dropping to a whispered sincerity. "Then at least you know you tried. You'll figure it out, Jake. You always do." As she stood before him, the swirling thoughts began to settle, mirroring her decision-making process. The prospect of failure still loomed, but so did the idea of rediscovering herself, the artist, the creator who once danced upon the edges of possibility. Her heart raced, each beat a flicker of courage nudging her toward clarity. "Maybe I could start sketching again," she whispered, the notion tasting foreign yet exhilarating. "See? That's the spirit." Tyler's smile widened, contagious in its warmth. "Whatever you decide, I'm here to help you." In that moment, as gratitude washed over her, a newfound determination began to solidify. Maybe the journey wouldn't be easy, but she acknowledged that she had allies in her corner, ready to lift her when she faltered. But just as she felt the buoyancy of hope rising within her, the door of the diner swung open once more, bringing an unexpected presence that sliced through her inspiration, the arrival of a high-profile patron whose demanding nature hinted at chaos to come. Would Jake be forced to confront her aspirations amid swirling distractions, or would this encounter steer her toward a pivotal decision that could reshape everything she held dear? Jake felt a shiver of anxiety wash over her as the glint of the high-profile patron's suit caught her eye. The air seemed charged, thick with anticipation. She watched as he surveyed the diner, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room, assessing the one thing that eluded him, the ordinary lives of those surrounding him. For a fleeting moment, she felt invisible, as if she were part of the backdrop decor rather than a participant in this unfolding drama. Tyler's eyes flickered towards the entrance, momentarily distracted from their earlier conversation. The jovial atmosphere of the diner dimmed as everyone turned their attention. The laughter, the chatter, the clatter of dishes, all reduced to a bewitching hush. The billionaire's son, Andrew, strolled in with an air of confident entitlement, effortlessly commanding attention and respect. It was both awe-inspiring and oppressive, like watching a reality she had long avoided. In the spiraling thoughts that gripped her, there was a pang of recognition. She recalled how often she used to sketch scenes from lives that seemed so far removed from her own everyday existence. She dismissed the impulse now, wondering if she had the right to step out of the shadow for inspiration. Andrew's presence incited a flurry of activity among the staff, as they readied themselves to please this important patron. Yet, Jake found herself rooted to her spot, grappling with her growing conviction to reclaim her artistic voice. Would she allow the pressures of this moment to drown out her resolution? "Breathe," she murmured to herself, summoning her courage. She could feel Tyler's reassuring presence beside her, reminding her of the camaraderie they shared. There was a faint murmuring now, a sound she barely noticed, as Andrew approached the counter with his entourage, rolling out a repartee designed to charm. But Jake found her focus shifting inward, already contemplating the mechanics of her art, the textures, the shadows, the interplay of light. Her chest tightened at the thought of pulling the sketchbook from under her desk. It felt impossible to integrate art into this chaotic backdrop. Yet, wasn't this precisely the moment she had fantasized about, to find beauty amidst distraction? "Hey!" Tyler nudged her gently, waving an arm to break through her thoughts. "You should go talk to him. This could be an opportunity." "An opportunity?" she echoed, questioning the idea as it left her lips. Her pulse quickened. Did she even want to place herself in that chaotic orbit? "Yeah, to show your work, or at least mention it," he encouraged, his intensity rising. "Remember how I said you'd figure it out? Easier said than done, but you won't know until you try." A corner of her mouth lifted slightly, caught between defiance and curiosity. What would happen if she did approach Andrew? Not as the shy waitress drifting near the fringes of the crowd, but as an artist with something meaningful to offer. She thought back to the sketch idea that had flourished in her mind earlier, the yearning to let that creativity flow. With a swift inhale, she shifted her stance, eclipsing the doubt as the voice in her mind urged her forward. "Okay, I'll do it. I think—" She hesitated but cleared her throat, eyes steeling with newfound resolve. "I'll talk to him." Tyler's expression lit up with surprise and encouragement, his enthusiasm infectious. As she stepped away from the safety of her desk, she focused on the distant figure of the billionaire's son. The closer she got, the more swirling doubts attempted to hijack her determination. Still, a flicker of hope wrestled with anxiety deep within. She could already see the potential connections, the conversations about art intermingled with business. Just as she reached the edge of Andrew's circle, a deafening laugh erupted nearby, a sudden distraction that pulled the attention completely back to Andrew. For a brief moment, she faltered, feeling the ground beneath her shift, as if the room itself questioned her presence. He turned, spotting her, and his gaze settled, curious but piercing. This was it, a chance to redefine herself in this moment of chaotic beauty. Would she take it? Jake steeled her resolve, ready to make her mark. However, as the banter continued around Andrew, something unexpectedly flickered in his eyes, a moment of recognition, something beyond mere curiosity, hinting at a connection she hadn't anticipated. Would his interest sway her decision, or distract her from her mission entirely? The weight of uncertainty bore down, her heart racing as she prepared to speak. It was time for decisive action. But would the revelation forge her path anew? Or would she discover that the chaos surrounding ambition could be just as daunting as the fears she had always harbored? The banter blurred into a haze of indistinct chatter, yet Andrew's gaze remained fixed on Jake, a flicker of something genuine igniting between them. The world around her dulled, morphing into an indistinct background, leaving only his penetrating gaze and her own racing heartbeat. Did he sense her resolve? Or was it simply another fleeting moment lost in time? "Hey," she finally managed, the sound barely escaping her lips. But it wasn't enough. His continued scrutiny bore into her, amplifying her anxiety even further. She needed to say more, to articulate the purpose behind her approach. I couldn't help but notice." Stumbling over her words, she felt her pulse quickening, the weight of expectation swirling around her until it threatened to choke her. "Are you an artist?" he interrupted, his voice steady and curious, cutting through her scattered thoughts. "Yes," she replied, her tone gaining strength. "I work at the diner, but Before she could finish, his expression softened, as if recognizing a kindred spirit rather than merely an employee. "I love supporting local art. The raw passion that comes from everyday artists is often overlooked." His sincerity penetrated the fog of her apprehension, the connection reinforcing her will. In that moment, Jake experienced a shift. She was not just a faded shadow anymore, but a small, vibrant spark edging toward prominence. "I've recently been working on pieces inspired by the people around me, their stories and struggles," she elaborated, the words flowing more freely. Each syllable was an assertion, a demand for recognition. "Would you be interested in seeing them?" "Absolutely. I always believe art can tell the stories we live but rarely express," he said, a smile breaking across his face that somehow made it easier to breathe. Jake couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration. Was he really interested? Or was this merely an act of kindness, a way to dismiss an awestruck waitress? Insecurity crept back, but determination fortified her resolve. Andrew wasn't just an affluent stranger. He had thus far offered her a glimmer of validation. The prospect of sharing her work with him kindled something renewed inside her. As Tyler moved nearby, an expression of encouragement on his face, Jake caught his eye. Could she trust this moment, confront her doubts, and reveal herself to a world that had felt so daunting until now? She made the snap decision to bridge the gap further, to share not only her art but a part of herself. "Maybe I could even create something live here at the diner one day," she ventured, momentarily slipping into a vivid vision of a community gathering around her artwork, energized by the creativity flowing through a space that felt both familiar and strange. Andrew raised an eyebrow, impressed. "I'd be interested to see that. I definitely think people would come to watch. There's something special about performances in unexpected places." His affirmation resonated within her, igniting a hope that flickered between fear and exhilaration. She recognized this as a critical juncture, not merely the pursuit of recognition, but an invitation to embrace her own identity. "Can I get your contact information? I'd love to share some sketches with you," she asked, feeling a daring edge to her proposition. "Sure thing," Andrew replied, retrieving his phone. The act of exchanging information, though commonplace, felt monumental. It was a tether to opportunity, a bridge to the artistic journey she had long hesitated to embark upon. As they completed the exchange, she felt a wave of determination wash over her. Only a brief encounter had shifted her perception and potential. However, beneath the excitement lay the unsettling realization that this connection could lead to expectations. His world and hers seemed miles apart, and she inherently feared that the closer she ventured into his sphere, the more of herself she might lose. Feeling the proximity of the diner's bright lights illuminating the contrasts, Jake silently braced herself for the changes ahead. Breaking through the threshold into this world of influence would necessitate courage, perhaps even more than she had summoned today. And yet, as she stepped back to find Tyler, buoyed by newfound purpose, she felt the first echoes of liberation mingling with trepidation. What would her art look like if she truly allowed the chaos around her to shape it? As the evening progressed, Jake realized it was not merely about what she could create, but how this pivotal encounter might reshape her vision of what it meant to redefine herself. The journey was just beginning, and already she sensed impending challenges on the horizon. A battle against self-doubt, preconceived notions, and the specters of her past. She could almost hear the words of her inner voice admonishing her to prepare. The time had come to face the reality of ambition, that it would demand everything she had and more. How far was she willing to go to capture her place amid the chaos? The soft glow of the diner's neon lights now felt like a beacon of possibility, yet beneath that comfort lay an ocean of uncertainty. Jake's heart raced, each beat a reminder of the decision she had just made. The decision to share her art, and with it, unravel parts of herself she had long kept hidden. As she moved through the familiar layout of the diner, her thoughts spiraled with excitement and fear. What if Andrew didn't like her work? What if her vulnerability was met with indifference? The idea that someone like him could find value in her art ignited a flicker of hope that battled against the shadows of her self-doubt. Despite the bustling environment around her, Jake began to isolate herself in her thoughts. Each interaction with customers cascaded through her mind, replaying mundane conversations that once felt ordinary and now seemed charged with potential. She found herself imagining them as subjects in her art, each face a story, every expression a narrative. The coffee machine sputtered, and the clatter of dishes served as a backdrop to her internal struggle. Would portraying the essence of these lives through her art draw her closer to who she wanted to become, or simply further highlight her limitations? The thought made her stomach churn. "Hey, you okay?" Tyler's voice cut through her thoughts, and she turned to see him leaning on the counter with genuine concern in his eyes. His friendship had been a constant source of support, yet she felt a growing distance as she embraced this newfound ambition. "Yeah, just thinking about my art," she admitted, surprised at how ready she was to confide in him. Thinking or overthinking? He raised an eyebrow, a teasing smirk on his face that gave her a momentary lift. "Probably both," she laughed softly. "I guess I'm just nervous about showing it to someone who actually knows art." "It's just showing your heart, Jake. If Andrew can't appreciate that, then screw him. You create for yourself first and foremost." Tyler's simple words grounded her momentarily, tethering her aspirations to the reality of her situation. She needed to remember why she painted, to depict the raw emotions that thrived within her, not solely to impress others. As the evening melted into night, she watched customers come and go, feeling their stories weave into her imagination like threads. But a new thread tugged at her contemplation, stemming from Andrew's earlier words. Performance in unexpected places. Could a live painting at the diner become her launchpad? With renewed determination, she decided she would give it a try. The thought incubated deep within her. How would she even begin? She envisioned setting up a corner with an easel, her brushes dancing to the sounds of clinking glasses and laughter, while revealing snippets of these lives in vibrant strokes. Would that be enough to draw viewers in? As she gathered her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It startled her from her reverie. A message from Andrew blinked on the screen. "Hey, Jake. Would love to see those sketches whenever you're ready. Your idea about the live painting? I think it could be amazing. Let's talk more soon." She resisted the urge to toss her phone across the diner amidst a surge of anxiety. He believed in her potential, yet that very belief amplified the pressure she felt. Could she truly step into the spotlight, knowing all the eyes and doubts would be on her? With a deep breath, Jake put her phone down. This was not just about creating art. This was about reclaiming her voice in a world that had often tried to silence it. Just then, a familiar face walked into the diner. Her art teacher from high school, Mrs. Sanders. The excitement of their old connection quickly mixed with the apprehension of how much she had grown since their last encounter. Would she see the artist Jake wanted to become? As she approached Mrs. Sanders, all thoughts of self-doubt and insecurity coiled tightly within her. The idea of discussing her aspirations terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Jake, it's so good to see you," Mrs. Sanders exclaimed, eyes sparkling with recognition. "Last I heard, you were still dabbling in art?" Jake opened her mouth to respond, and the weight of her aspirations spilled out. "Actually, I'm ready to do something much bigger. I want to start sharing my art with the world, and I'd love to show you." In that moment, upon the edge of her transformation, Jake understood that the conversation would be a defining moment, not just to reveal her art, but to confront the fear that had kept her from stepping fully into her identity. The crossroads had arrived, and she could feel its potency in the air. What she didn't know was that this conversation would lead to revelations beyond her wildest imagination, shattering the confines of her self-imposed limits and setting her on a trajectory that would question everything she thought she knew about herself. Jake's apprehension hung in the air as she faced Mrs. Sanders, the weight of her unspoken ambitions pressing heavily on her chest. This wasn't just a conversation about her art. It was an unveiling of her very identity. Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured towards the diner's colorful walls, adorned with nostalgic memorabilia, feeling both vulnerable and empowered. "I've been exploring techniques," Jake continued, allowing enthusiasm to bleed into her words. "But it's more than just that. I want to connect with people, tell their stories, reflect emotions that often go unnoticed." Mrs. Sanders listened intently, nodding with a smile that mirrored the warmth Jake felt in her chest. "That's exactly what art is meant to do, Jake. It's powerful when it speaks to the human experience. So, what's holding you back?" Jake hesitated, the inevitable wave of doubt flooding her thoughts. What if it's not good enough? What if no one cares? "Those fears are common," Mrs. Sanders replied, her voice steady. "But remember, art is subjective. You owe it to yourself to express what's inside you, regardless of the audience's reaction." Jake's heart raced. For the first time, she felt that an adult, someone who had shaped her path, believed in her potential. "I'm thinking about doing live painting at the diner to share my process and invite conversation." "Live painting?" Mrs. Sanders raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "That could be a brilliant way to engage your audience. Not only do you showcase your craft, but you create a space for interaction. It's an experience, not just an exhibition." Jake's mind raced with the possibilities. She could transform the diner into a vibrant space, layers of paint and personality emerging to the rhythm of conversations and shared stories. It was exhilarating and terrifying. She had to push her comfort zone. The idea of exposing herself in a live performance felt like jumping into the deep end without knowing how to swim. "But what if I fail?" she blurted, the vulnerability surfacing once more. "Failure is part of growth." Mrs. Sanders' voice softened, yet it carried the weight of experience. "Embrace it. Celebrate the journey of learning, not just the outcome. You're stepping into your truth, and that's worth every moment of discomfort." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing the encouragement. She had a choice to make: retreat into the safety of familiar patterns or leap into the unknown, trusting her instincts and her art. "Are you ready for this?" Mrs. Sanders asked, measuring the depth of her intentions with a piercing gaze. Jake inhaled deeply, her mind swirling with visions of color and canvas. "Yes, I'm ready to embrace my art, my stories. I need to try. Then let's make a plan, Mrs. Sanders said, enthusiasm bubbling in her tone. I can help guide you through the setup, and we can utilize social media to bring in an audience. You'll be amazed at how your community can rally around your work. This isn't just about painting. It's about creating connections. As they formulated the sketch of a plan together, Jake could feel her anxiety morphing into an electrifying anticipation. In this moment, she was no longer just a waitress harboring dreams in secret. She was an artist willing to stake her claim in the world. After exchanging numbers, they promised to meet again in a few days, and as Jake waved goodbye, she felt lighter. It wasn't just a destination she was seeking. It was the road itself that would shape her. The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, but also with the promise of discovery. She was ready to confront her fears and test the boundaries of her creative expression. Yet, in her excitement, another thought flickered, nagging at the edges of her consciousness, the expectations and opinions that Andy had of her work. She remembered his message and the weight of his belief, adding an entirely new layer of pressure. What would happen if she failed to meet those expectations in the very act of revealing her process? Her heart pounded as she pondered the depth of the challenge ahead. The stage was set. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the fear of judgment squelch her newfound voice? Jake took a final glance around the diner, infused with potential, and recognized that this was just the beginning. With newfound resolve, she turned to leave but couldn't shake the question that lingered in her mind. What was she truly willing to sacrifice for the sake of her art? As the days unfolded, Jake moved with a purpose that felt electrifying, yet terrifying. The weight of her initial fears began to dissolve amid the fervor of preparation. With Mrs. Sanders as her mentor, she meticulously plotted the logistics of her live painting showcase, balancing her responsibilities at the diner with this burgeoning ambition. Each stroke of the brush in her sketches echoed her progress, and the prospect of sharing her art transformed her nerves into a vibrant tapestry of excitement. The night of the event arrived. The diner transformed into a canvas of creativity, adorned with bright lights and art supplies meticulously arranged on the counter. Customers lined up, drawn by the buzz of anticipation that filled the air. As she stepped onto the makeshift stage, her heart raced. The vulnerability of sharing her work felt like standing naked before an audience. Yet the familiar atmosphere of the diner grounds her. "Welcome to my live painting," Jake announced, her voice firm despite the nervous tremble. "Tonight, I'll be illustrating the stories of this community. Let's create something together." As she began to paint, the rhythm of her movements felt instinctual, each brushstroke telling a story that resonated deeply with her and her audience. The ordinary conversations transformed into profound interactions, as people paused, captivated by the vibrant bursts of color emerging on the canvas. Each interaction, laughter, and shared connection reinforced her commitment to art. She was not merely painting, she was communicating. Amid the crowd, Tyler watched with a proud smile, his unwavering support looming behind every self-assured brushstroke. His earlier encouragement echoed in her mind, transforming her initial doubts into a fierce determination to showcase not just her talent, but the essence of the community surrounding her. Then, she caught sight of Andrew, engrossed in the endeavor, his eyes brimming with fascination. A shared connection flickered between them as he leaned closer, observing her transformation from waitress to artist. The initial trepidation she had felt dwindled. In this moment, she was no longer invisible but fully present as she poured herself into the creation. As the night wore on, the unveiling of her paintings ignited enthusiasm, prompting unexpected conversations about art, identity, and community struggles. Each spectator reflected a piece of her journey, a harmony of stories beautifully intertwined. The collective energy surged, affirming that she belonged in this space, where vulnerability transformed lives into masterpieces. By the end of the evening, Jake's heart swelled with accomplishment. The painting, flanked with voices, laughter, and energy, stood as a testament to her rebirth as an artist. No longer did she feel torn between her obligations and passions. Instead, She felt whole, enveloped by self-acceptance and pride. The audience erupted in applause, a cacophony of validation that flooded her with warmth. Then it happened. As Jake stepped down from her makeshift stage to greet patrons, she was met with a wave of genuine admiration. Conversations flourished. A local gallery owner approached her first, expressing interest in showcasing her work. The artist she had buried beneath layers of doubt now stood illuminated and alive in the eyes of others. Recognition felt deserved, intertwined with her growth. In that moment of connection, Jake understood that she had conquered her fear, not only through art, but also through a renewed belief in herself. Grief and obligation no longer defined her. Her identity became vibrant, equal parts artist and individual, intricately woven with passion. As she looked around at the supportive faces, Tyler's, Andrew's, and the patrons who shared pieces of their lives, Jake knew she had successfully forged her path. She had proven that art was not merely an escape, it was a lifeline, a means to connect, engage, and ultimately flourish. The thunderous applause echoed in her ears, and tears brimmed in her eyes. Not of sadness, but exhilaration and gratitude. In the convergence of her painting and the applause of her audience, she felt a concrete surge of growth. She had reclaimed her voice, and in doing so, she had gifted herself the greatest achievement of all, the acknowledgement of her true self. With the promise of future showcases lingering, Jake took a step back, absorbing the moment fully, knowing that she had finally achieved not just recognition, but the transformation she so desperately sought. The weight of her past had been repurposed into something extraordinary, and it was now her turn to mold those experiences into a vibrant future. This was more than art. This was her life unfolding, step by step, color by color. And as she reveled in the fulfillment of her journey, she silently vowed to always embrace the chaos that came with chasing her dreams. As a new day dawned on the horizon, Jake was ready to stretch her wings further than ever before. She would never again allow uncertainty to tether her back down into the shadows. Join her and witness the triumph of authenticity, transformation, and human connection. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support creators like Jake. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of overcoming stories understand the importance of standing together, and this is the moment to show your support.